mean-spirited and they're selfish and nothing trickles down with it. That's what they think of anything that's a business. Now you get to a huge corporation, multinational. Just amplify what they think of it. But the point is, anybody who owns a business cannot possibly be a real person. Anybody who owns a business has to be a suspect. They hate and despise capitalism. They really do not like self-reliance. And it's not a mystery. Anyway, let me get started back to the phones at 21. This is James of Florida and Terry. Great to have you. Glad you waited. Hi.
Rush, good to hear from you. Thank you for taking my call. There's a lot of talk about reform on law enforcement when the true reform should actually be on the media. The media has a lot of power when it comes to controlling the emotions of the American people. What happened to George Floyd was wrong now. I'm 17 years in law enforcement, but I feel if the media had covered George Floyd's incident differently, saying that law enforcement using too much force on American people and just included other people that died, like Tony Timpa out of Texas, none of this stuff would have happened.
Well, I don't know. First place, how are you going to change the media? How are you going to punish them for being too emotional?
I don't know. That's beyond me. But I just feel that the media is very corrupt, and they control the way that the American people, those that rely on it.
No, you're right. And I'll tell you, there's something else that you have swerved into the truth on. I have learned very, very painful over the course of the many years of doing this program that it is much easier to either reinforce or change anybody's opinion on anything if you do it via their emotions. And I don't. I try to change people's minds with the power of reason, thinking, intellect. Most people are never going to be open to that, but if you can reach their emotions, you can change their minds. It's human nature in a sense, and it's the media and a bunch of people on the left understand it. You know exactly how to tweak people's emotions, particularly guilt, the big one. So let me ask you, are you still there, Terry?
Yes.
If they would have done what differently where George Floyd's concerned, you think it might have been different? Done what differently?
Because they focused on it being a race thing, and law enforcement, there are more people that have died the same exact way that George Floyd died that were other races, and they didn't bring any attention to that. I feel that, if they had said that law enforcement, there is people that use too much force, and that's what this was, is a excessive use of force, and there's no evidence to prove that it was a race issue, which has caused all this.
Exactly my point. You don't need the evidence, you just need to connect with people's emotions. And that's exactly what they did. And by the time, look, the Floyd example may not be the best, because I don't think anybody watching that for 8 minutes can be persuaded of anything about it other than what they originally see. White cop, black victim, no reason for this guy to be dead. Whether it was racist or not, the media comes in, there's already a movement on to play the race card and to divide the country by race. That fit perfectly. Unlike you, I don't think there was a racial component to it all. From the cops' standpoint, I think there was a bunch of other stuff that's of reprobate status, but I don't think it was primarily racist. It doesn't matter what I think. Most people who saw it will conclude that it was, because the cop was white, the victim was black, and they know, quote, unquote, that the cops are murdering black people every day. Do you remember the police union? Don't misunderstand. Remember the police union guy in New York who blew up? He was speaking to the media, with some of his membership standing behind him. And he said that he had encountered a thing the other day where young African-American kids are being taught that every day a white cop kills a black kid on the way home from school. They're taught this. They're taught it by their parents or in school. He heard about it, and he blew up, and he grabbed his badge, and he held it up. He said, "This shield has not been discolored or disflavored by anything that happened in Minneapolis. That simply is not true. That does not happen. It does not happen. African-American kids are not killed every day on the way home from school by white cops." Well, you ought to see what a bunch of... you ought to see what a bunch of Islamists believe the Jews do. The same kind of crap is taught about Jews in the Middle East as every day a black kid is murdered by a white cop on the way home from school. It's absurd, but it makes an emotional connection. And if that emotional connection confirms an emotion somebody's already feeling, then your work is done. You have a convert. Who's next? I appreciate the call, Terry. Where are we headed next? Stephen looks like in Los Angeles. Great to have you, and you're next. Glad you waited. Hi.
Hi, Rush. I'm glad I waited too. Listened to you for 28 years. I pull in for you. I think you're sounding great. I think I last spoke to you in 2005.
Well, that's 15 years ago. So it seems like yesterday, but 15 years ago.
It does seem like yesterday, and so does 1992, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, just speaking as an LGBT person, I'm in favor of the decision. I sort of see it from two ways, sort of an emotional way, as you were talking about, and also from a rational perspective. As far as the law is concerned, it almost seems to me that there's kind of a lowest, I don't want to say lowest common denominator, but basically when you're using pure reason and you say, okay, well, is sex and sexual orientation the same thing? I think that you have to concede that, well, say, for example, you said, well, somebody can have a husband. Another person can't have a husband. What sex are they? Well, there you have sex coming into play. Now, I know a lot of people, you know, on the emotional side, you know, people say, well, that just doesn't seem right. You know, that doesn't seem, but again, on the emotional side, though, there are individuals that have had...
That is not what this is about. That, and see, that is the point. You are satisfied with it because you agree with it. Because it makes some kind of emotional or intellectual connection with you. But that's not what the case is about. What the case is about is, can you take a law passed in 1964 and throw a bunch of things in it that were not in it? Can you include a bunch of behaviors that were not in the law because nobody knew they existed? There was not a political movement based around them. The Civil Rights Act and Title VII of it, 1964, was about a lot of things, but it wasn't about gay marriage, it wasn't about transgenderism, it wasn't about LGBTQ, it wasn't about anything, because that didn't exist. So the question is, can a justice of the United States Supreme Court just decide to take what is considered to be the norm in American life in 2020 and just by his own fiat toss it into a law written in 1964 that never even contemplated it? And the answer is no. You've got to go through some real hoops to do that. Now, Justice Scalia came up with a term called textualism that it's a tough thing to define, and what this case is using is supposedly his definition of textualism to make this legal, and it's not. They're bastardizing what Scalia came to know as and popularize as textualism. Adding text to a law